What is toxic shame, and how can toxic shame interfere with recovering from family scapegoating abuse? That's what I'll be talking about in today's episode of Beyond Family Scapegoating Abuse, so stick around. Welcome to my channel. I'm Rebecca Mandeville, licensed psychotherapist and family systems expert. And for those of you who already have read my book, Rejected, Shamed, and Blamed, you may have found my chapter 13, How Toxic Shame Interferes with Recovery. And this is a critical concept for adult survivors of family scapegoating abuse to understand. And I had not found anything in regard to complex trauma, toxic shame, and family scapegoating years ago when I was looking for literature. It may be out there, but at the time I was writing, I didn't find it. So I incorporated into my family scapegoating abuse, or FSA, research questions for my respondents on symptoms and effects that they identified as having from being scapegoated by family. That's how several years ago it became very obvious to me that those who are scapegoated in their families can end up experiencing complex trauma symptoms. And it also became very evident to me that toxic shame was at the core of the scapegoat narrative, what I call the scapegoat narrative. I did a video on that last week. In fact, I'll link you to that at the end of this video. And toxic shame can also interfere with your recovery efforts if you don't understand what's going on. And that toxic shame may indeed be there, because toxic shame is held unconsciously. It's different than ordinary shame. When we do something we maybe regret or feel bad about, we have what's called appropriate or ordinary shame. But toxic shame is indeed unconscious. And if you are someone who is feeling stuck in your recovery, I always invite people to look at, have they really felt their anger, what I call righteous rage? Have they been able to grieve the losses and fully experience the grief they may have? And I'll also explore with clients the possibility they may be holding toxic shame, and that would have been developed very early in life. In my book, I also have a chapter on the false self and the true self. And we develop a false self in part in response to toxic shame. And that is very common when it comes to scapegoating abuse, family scapegoating abuse, because ultimately you're getting the message that you're fundamentally flawed, defective, and deserving of being treated badly. And if you carry this into adulthood and then even get the knowledge, the intellectual knowledge, oh, I was scapegoated and gee, I need to heal from that, and you're not aware of the toxic shame, you're going to hit some roadblocks in your recovery sooner or later. And I'd like to tell you more about that. Toxic shame is a deep core shame where, as I've said in previous videos, it's not like, oh, I'm feeling shame, I feel shame. No, it's so embedded in your identity that you are shame. And toxic shame often will drive the fawn submit response. This is my clinical opinion. I haven't come across research on that yet. There may be research on that, but that fawn submit response, the freeze response, the flight response, often is supported in part by toxic shame. If you have a fight response, I know that you have struggled and have many losses, may have had to end contact with family, but I also say good for you and more power to you. Many of us, myself included, we had to learn, in a way, a healthy fight response of knowing when our boundaries were crossed or we weren't being treated well, and learn how to say, hey, stop, or that's not okay, or even no. I tell my clients who are interested in knowing a little bit about me, this is the truth. I did not learn I even had a right to say no, no. I had to learn how to say no. But before I could learn how to say no, I had to learn that I had a right to say no. And this can happen in highly dysfunctional families where there's a lot of enmeshment, and a child is in a way either overtly or overtly punished in various ways when they start to individuate, when they become different than their family, may have different interests, different tastes, different thoughts, different likes. And you learn really quickly in these highly enmeshed families that it's not okay to pull away from the nuclear emotional mass, as we call it in Bowenian family systems theory. It's not okay to become a unique individual. You're supposed to stay what I call in layperson's terms the glob. The nuclear emotional mass is the family glob, and no one's allowed to become an individual. You need to be staying in that family mass. So if you had a fight response, you had some recognition that what was happening to you wasn't okay, and you may have given it back as good as you got. You paid a price for that. You may not have as much shame or toxic shame as someone who comes to see me, who I can see pretty quickly is a people pleaser, appeaser, fawn submit response, quote unquote codependent. They don't know where they end and another person begins. That was their survival response as opposed to someone with the fight response. And I would hypothesize that the flight response and the freeze response also may be supported by toxic shame. I don't want to say definitely because I haven't researched on that yet. If you know people who have, or you have thoughts on that, feel free to leave that information in the comments. So when children grow up in environments where they are made to feel that they are fundamentally bad, that there's something wrong with them, they're a failure, they're stupid, they're incompetent, they are unworthy of love and deserving of being rejected, shamed, or blamed, it's the title of my book, by their family, then they may have developed a core identity around that narrative. And that's what I talked about last week, that scapegoat narrative that gets promoted within and even outside of the family. This narrative may have been consciously created by a parent that usually is with a narcissistic parent, and there is some intentional malevolence going on there. Malignant narcissism, you can have all kinds of really sociopathic types of behaviors that get displayed toward the children. For families that are dysfunctional, families with a lot of trauma, intergenerational trauma, the scapegoat narrative may arise out of what is known in the family systems field as the family projective identification process. And I have said before that this is similar to a shared psychosis. And I think the term I like to give it now with my very bad French is folie à famille instead of a folie à deux. Folie à deux, it's when two people are sharing a delusion, sharing this reality. It's the mad dance, so to speak, the mad dance of two. Well, I call it this family projective identification process, the mad dance of the entire family that is believing this false narrative about you. And if this happens at a young enough age and your neural pathways are developing in a sense around this fundamental belief that you're defective in some manner, you're likely going to also have toxic shame. Toxic shame is chronic, it's pervasive, it's unrelenting, and as I said earlier, it's unconscious. So it's very hard to identify or know that you have it, but your body is going to be experiencing it. Your body, once you start getting more awareness around trauma and toxic shame, you can feel your body becoming that shame. And then you can feel that trauma response of fawn, submit, please, or freeze. What on some level you were conditioned to do to survive your family of origin and to survive what may have felt like a hostile environment, like a war zone. Remember, small children especially, they're going to believe what the big people tell them. You're born into this family matrix, and this is, it's like a virtual reality. This is the only reality you know. And so if the big people who are feeding and clothing you and giving you shelter are saying that you're dumb, lazy, ugly, difficult, flawed in some manner, not good enough, not lovable, these things can stay with you lifelong. As a young child, when you're getting these messages, you will, the term is introject, take into your psyche, introject that reality that you are somehow flawed and defective. And it won't necessarily be an intellectual thought. It will be just this becoming the shame, existing within this pool of core shame. This is how you can get scapegoated wherever you go, which I did a video on a while back. And I had some people misunderstand that video because they thought I was victim blaming. And I was nothing of the sort. I was not victim blaming. I was talking about the fact that if you're going through life and you're basically dwelling in a sea of toxic shame, you will have unconscious behaviors, body language, posture that could attract, in whatever group system you're in, that scapegoating energy. Because think of it this way, toxic shame is like tar that you're coated with, but you don't know it. And unconsciously in a group, an unhealthy group especially, they discharge their own unacceptable parts, their shadow. We know this about the human psyche. They will discharge it outside of them onto someone else. This is made very alive, this dynamic, in the book Lord of the Flies, if any of you know of that novel, where at the end, the character Piggy is basically slaughtered and sacrificed for this boy tribe that were living on an island after a plane crash. I should have given you a spoiler alert, because there is something in our primitive psyche that needs to discharge our own disowned parts onto another. And if you're coated with that tar of toxic shame, that projection may stick on you. That's an intrapsychic process. That's something we know about human nature. And that is not blaming the victim. That's just describing a reality that is known about our human psyches, our human nature. We exist as both light and dark. And I know there's some Native American story where which dog are you going to feed, or which wolf are you going to feed? You have a wolf here that's light, the light, and the wolf here that's the dark. Well, which one are you going to feed? And some people feed the dark. They don't want to wake up to the light of truth. And they benefit from being in the dark. They benefit from not acknowledging that they have an unconscious, that they may be behaving in harmful ways. They benefit from their defense mechanisms, such as denial. And they don't want to wake up and take responsibility for their actions. They don't want to see how they are causing harm. And if you are filled with toxic shame, it's very unlikely you will be able to assert yourself and confront the abuse head on. And hey, here's the double bind I talked about last week. What if you do? Well, guess what? The healthier you get, the more you set boundaries or say to a scapegoating family member, it's not okay to talk to me that way. That ship's come and gone. It's a new day here. Your scapegoating's more than likely going to get worse. There's the double bind. You get healthier, you wake up to what's happening, you realize that you're being treated poorly or actively abused, you try to put a stop to it, and you're scapegoated more. And instead of being supported by other family members, you may face the complicity of silence, and no one speaks up for you. You may even heard, oh, I can't say anything to our brother. I can't take sides. I'm not going to take sides. Don't draw me into this. And you're being abused. I mean, undeniable abuse, bullying, narcissistic abuse, lies being told about you, your character being defamed, but they don't want to get involved. They can't take sides. Well, that's more abuse. Silence is complicity. You may not get support from your own mental health provider. You may not get support from your church. They may say, hey, family is everything, and you need to go take care of this and work it out. You certainly are unlikely to get support from society at large, because scapegoating, probably more than any other form of abuse, psycho-emotional abuse, invisible abuse, it's the form of abuse most likely to fall upon deaf ears, where people are so uncomfortable to think that this could be happening in a family. It's assumed that you're telling tales or stretching the truth, or you must have done something to make your family treat you this way. And what do you think's going to happen if you are already swimming in a soup of toxic shame and you reach out for help and you're made to feel like you are bad, that you did something to deserve the abuse? I really hope work like mine and work that other therapists are doing out there in regard to scapegoating, what I call family scapegoating abuse and narcissistic abuse, I hope it's raising awareness. And this is why I felt it was so important to give family scapegoating abuse a distinct name from narcissistic abuse. As someone here on YouTube wrote me, I really appreciate it. They said, by naming it, by giving this particular family dynamic a name, you got to the core of a particular type of narcissistic abuse. And it's true. That's what my research was all about. That's what my book's about. That's why I'm here on YouTube. It needs its own name. This needed a name. I gave it a name. And it has nothing to do with me wanting to brand myself on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere else. My naming this has helped a lot of people. And my pointing out that toxic shame and complex trauma and betrayal trauma are significant facets of family scapegoating abuse. And any therapist working with someone who comes in with what appears to be scapegoating dynamics in their family that they're the target of, that mental health professional should be assessing also for betrayal trauma symptoms, attachment trauma symptoms, complex trauma symptoms, and toxic shame. Because toxic shame, if it's not uncovered, and if the survivor cannot be made aware of it through whatever means, they may unconsciously sabotage their recovery again and again and again. They may not know why they're sabotaging their recovery. They may not know why they're doing their recovery work and then find they're back drinking again when they've been sober for a year, or they're suddenly missing their therapy appointments. They are alienating everyone close to them as they're trying to do the recovery work. That's all stems from toxic shame. And I can back that up with my research. And that is something, as more people now are talking about toxic shame, that we know can happen. The other thing that can happen with toxic shame, this ties in also to betrayal trauma, when we're betraying ourselves, betraying our own aspirations toward health and recovery. With toxic shame, we may continue to negate or attack ourselves, I'm worthless, I'm stupid, I'm unlovable, something's wrong with me. That's why I don't have friends. I can't make friends. There is something wrong with me. That's why I got scapegoated at work. There must be something wrong with me. And there's not. The only thing that's wrong is you got scapegoated and you may be carrying some toxic shame, and that can contribute to this, what I call tar and feathering process, where you are becoming the piggy of the group, so to speak. You're getting slaughtered because when you put a bunch of humans together, some pretty ugly things can happen if people are not awake and conscious. That's how racism comes about. That's how prejudice comes about. That's how a lot of ugly things in our society comes about. And that also happens with scapegoating. Another thing that can happen is you may avoid your inner reality. You may become what you believe people need you to be. You may become super helpful. You may stuff down your real feelings. You may people please, become quote unquote codependent. And now we know codependency often is the trauma response of fawn, submit. You can also, with toxic shame, unconsciously slip into becoming the perennial victim. And I say that with compassion. Again, I'm not victim blaming here. I'm just telling you the truth. This is what can happen. You can become the perennial victim, and then you can blame, attack, and criticize others. I had I think, a very sensitive, lovely comment come to me today here on YouTube, a very self-honest comment, where the commenter was wondering if they had been scapegoating their own children, that they have been terribly scapegoated, and they wonder if they have done this to their children. It can happen because you are so hurt and you're in such pain, and your pain's not ever been validated, that you can have a ball of rage in the pit of your gut. And it can come out in various ways. And indeed, yes, you can become a bully. You can become someone who may seek to control through being the victim. You may even develop narcissistic traits. You may try to have power over people and bully others in an attempt to feel a sense of power. That can happen. And we have to have the courage to look at that and ask ourselves, have I done the same thing to others as they have done to me? Another thing that can happen is you may isolate yourself from others, avoid social situations because of toxic shame. That will be accompanied by anxiety, a sense of mistrust, feeling inadequate, feeling incompetent, and then you feel lonely. And you don't know how to break the pattern. You don't know how to get out of it. That toxic shame keeps you from even reaching out for help. And when you do reach out for help, if you're also experiencing being the victim, you may reach out for help in an attacking way or in a victim-like way. And that can actually be a fifth trauma response that Dr. Janina Fisher talks about. And it's called the cry for help response. So how do you start healing from toxic shame? Well, first you have to be aware that you may have it. If you related to some of the things I talked about today, you can pick up my book, you read this chapter, some of the other chapters, especially the one on the false self, and you're identifying with this, you need to recognize you may have toxic shame, and that might be dictating a lot of your behaviors in life, maybe contributing on some level to scapegoating because of the energy that can be associated, very subtle signals that we can send out when we're basically walking and talking toxic shame on 2 feet. You need to start paying attention to your body's signals. This signal, sometimes subtle, but sometimes not so subtle. A feeling of collapsing, a feeling of needing to hide, a feeling of needing to cry might be signs of toxic shame. If you're feeling righteous rage, a pit of rage in your stomach, I say great. That's great, because that means you are coming out of that toxic shame, and you're maybe feeling that anger, righteous rage, as I call it. And you are going to stand up for yourself one way or another. that's actually an antidote to the toxic shame. So I love it when I hear people tell me that they're starting to get kind of that fight response. So they're giving it right back, or they're setting boundaries, or they're going to end contact because they know if they stand up for themselves, they're going to get attacked even more in their family. Whatever you need to do to free yourself of that toxic shame and be able to hold your ground and claim your right to exist in this world and step fully into your light is the best antidote for toxic shame. And it is possible because I see it every day in my practice. You may not even be consciously aware of thoughts that you're having, but your body may be having some very strong symptoms or giving you some signals. So if your face is red, becomes flushed, hot, you feel overwhelmed, frightened, anxious, tired, depressed, some of those hypoarousal symptoms I talked about in some of my clinical videos on my channel here, that can be an indication that you are experiencing toxic shame related to that damaging scapegoat narrative. Healing toxic shame requires being able to forge a non-judging, non-shaming, accepting relationship first and foremost with yourself. There's a workbook I use with my clients after we've done the Janina Fisher workbook, Transcending the Living Legacy of Trauma. And it's called the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. And that's a great workbook to use with my clients once they've gotten through Dr. Fisher's workbook, because if you cannot develop that compassionate, non-judgmental relationship with yourself, it's going to be very difficult for you to do that with other people. You also will want to consider, as I've said time and time again, searching for a trauma-informed therapist. Janina Fisher now has a search function on her website that you can find a therapist certified in her modality, a very integrative modality called trauma-informed stabilization treatment, which I find is very effective for my clients who have suffered from family scapegoating abuse. If you liked this video and you got something out of it, I'd appreciate you giving it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, I encourage you to be discerning when you're out there gathering information, when you're getting information from people, and do that as a gift to yourself. I'll look forward to seeing you next week.